and welcome again. Assuming that we have done as commanded and as the law demands, taken our oaths to the Constitution via the Barons Committee, and started sending out notices to those alleged authorities whose demands are impacting our lives, we now turn our attention to those cases, fortunately few, where those aggressors respond to our communications with renewed demands. Before doing so, however, we take a moment to inform everyone of an exciting new development in our mission of spreading the word about Article 61. On Monday, June the 21st, I was granted an interview with highly respected journalist Sonia Poulton and her co-host Sean Ward on her early morning show, 8 a.m. UK time, titled Rise, on the dynamic platform Brand New Tube. This show already, after only starting its current format late in 2021, has more followers than 3 of the mainstream broadcasters in Britain. So it promises to give a big boost to the number of people becoming aware of Article 61, and essential to building momentum for dismantling the treasonous regime oppressing us. To view the interview, check out my Facebook profile page or go to... It's a 2-hour show, and the Article 61 section starts at minute 54 and runs for almost 30 minutes, Sonia very generously letting our segment run well over time. The link will be available in the comments section as well as visible on screen. We're hoping to do further spots and to introduce expert educators such as Fitzroy Sterling of Soundbite University on Facebook and Nun 2K channel on YouTube with Carl Liebold. Both these sources are gold mines of insight and information on the whole topic of constitutional law and 1215 Magna Carta. So, on to the question of rebuttals when people try to negate the effect of our notices. As mentioned before, this usually happens when someone refers one of the notices to their overseeing officer, who, knowing perhaps no more about the law than their underlings, orders them to try again and see if there's anything to it, or whether it's just some joker trying to dodge their legal obligations. The result may well be another letter from the department, simply reiterating the demand, or trying to rephrase it, or more probably, attempting to deny that Article 61 has any relevance to the current legal system, or even exists at all. I've mentioned the word legal twice in that short passage, so let's reaffirm that legal and lawful are 2 vastly different things. A law is something that exists in perpetuity and cannot be changed unless the entire community gives their assent. That's because such laws emanate from nature, such as laws of physics or the 4 common law tenets, which everyone knows instinctively by the action of their conscience to be immutable if we are to have a peaceful, harmonious society. Such changes would only occur by the actions of jurors in proper constitutionally established courts de jure, where it was clear that the community agreed to such amendments, and would be quite rare. What the practitioners of the legal system describe as laws, however, are not immutable. They may change from parliament to parliament, according to the influence of politicians, or even more horrendously, lobbyists, who buy and sell political favours, which they pass into legislation. It is recognised that parliaments cannot bind the actions of future parliaments. Only constitutions of true laws may do that. Almost all such legislation or statutes or acts of parliament violate common law because they grant arbitrary advantages to some citizens over others, when in reality all are sovereign and ruled by no one else. As such, legislation is not law, and to claim that it is constitutes blatant fraud. It's vital that each person comes to understand this distinction. because it's by such trickery with words that people have been hoodwinked for centuries. Let's take an example. In Article 7 of the Magna Carta, it states, "At her husband's death, a widow may have her marriage portion and inheritance at once and without trouble. She shall pay nothing for her dower, marriage portion, or any inheritance that she and her husband held jointly on the day of his death. She may remain in her husband's house for 40 days after his death, and within this period her dower shall be assigned to her." This, which was representative at the time of the fact that women generally held less than equal status with men, would be regarded as deplorable today. And indeed it has become recognised over time, and not before time of course, that there should be no difference between such status. And today we have legislation enacted which allows women to enjoy the inheritance of what was jointly owned by husband and wife permanently, without any such time restrictions being placed upon it. This is an example of enacted legislation which enhanced the natural rights of all people, bringing the genders into line with each other, and it's thus a true law, because everyone agrees with it. It's been voted on in Parliament and in the Court of Public Opinion. We can see the difference between such positive changes which promote harmony in the community and those such as tax laws, which cause all sorts of argument and dispute about why some people ought to pay more than others. Even more outrageous are Acts of Parliament which order discrimination between people, based, for example, upon whether they have submitted to coerced medical procedures like vaccination or not. I cannot recommend highly enough the lectures and discussions given by Fitzroy Sterling on these issues. Almost everyone today has a need to realign their thinking on what is meant by people when they talk about law, constitutions, legality and lawfulness, etc. It's all too easy to slip back into erroneous modes of thought which have been drummed into us since birth. Only when we start to fully grasp these distinctions do we have a serious chance of getting these concepts into the heads of police and other alleged agents of the Crown who are attempting to oppress us unlawfully. It takes practice, and it cannot be undertaken too soon. This then is the purpose of these rebuttal letters, which we use when confronting people who have failed to understand our initial responses to their unlawful demands. There are excellent examples in David Robinson's treatise, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, downloadable from the Practical Lawful Dissent 2 group website on Facebook, and here are 4 others, from which we can select according to our preferences or their relevance to our situation. 2 are very simply expressed, and sometimes that's the best way to deal with those harassing us. The other 2 give a more detailed explanation of the concept of law that we've been discussing here, and are probably more suited to a situation where the objection to our notices has been sent from higher up the food chain than the original officer. I would start with one of the simple ones if the objection came from the same person, then move on to the more detailed example to add extra emphasis to the point. Even if we are sending some of these rebuttals, of course we proceed with the next notice in the sequence, because it's necessary to complete the full lawful process, and each notice ramps up the pressure on the offenders. As we have noted, we begin by seeming almost friendly, stating that of course we're not refusing outright to comply. All we require is that they can prove we are wrong about Article 61 being in effect, and will do as they ask. Then it becomes more of a sticky wicket for them as they discover that failing to respond or rebut our claims places them in a position which is both unlawful and untenable from their own point of view to proceed with their demands. We always need to bear in mind that the law applies equally to all, so we cannot allow any counterclaims that they make to go unrebutted, or we run the same risk ourselves of going into default and dishonour. We thus ensure that we are always on the front foot and are the ones asking the questions. Should they decide to raise the stakes and threaten us with the police or a court summons, we simply start the process all over again with the new bullies. The further up the chain of the legalese system that we progress, the more these people will understand the seriousness of the treason evidence being amassed against them. If it should be that we are subjected to unlawful arrest or detention, we then still have the option of pursuing the offending officers in a tort, or informing them that there is an ever-growing number of people becoming aware of Article 61, and that the date of their trial before a properly constituted court of jurors may not be as distant a prospect as they suppose. It always helps to remind them that treason is the most serious crime that can be committed, even worse than murder, and that they would be looking at life in prison and full asset stripping as a minimum sentence for sedition, which is publicly denying the Constitution, and the death penalty for treason. The Blair government's attempt to revoke that provision was itself treasonous, especially so once Article 61 was brought into effect. One final question in such a confrontation might be to politely ask how their family would feel about that. Or would it not be preferable to simply follow the law as we are doing? Understatement can be a much more effective deterrent than an angry rant, and more likely to bring about a period of quiet introspection before deciding to throw their full weight around, pressing charges, etc., which would put them into a very serious position, both lawfully and from their own legalese perspective. If we are well versed in our current understanding, it helps us to remain calm and rational when threatened. We also become increasingly able to help others take the right steps, and that brings closer our goal of getting enough people standing lawfully under Article 61 to cause the traitors to think again and sue for forgiveness and peace. Thank you for watching.